Hey everybody, I am a bit of an emotional wreck right now for reasons that I can't exactly get into, but I just finished Spider-Man Miles Morales. What a game. What an experience. What a fucking phenomenon. A piece of art, legitimately. I'm about to gush over this game to an unhealthy degree. I want you to prepare for that right now. First of all, I, like many people, was not able to secure a PS5, at least not yet. I'm still working on that. So I played the PS4 version, and even though it was not the ultimate experience of this game, it still looks, plays, sounds, and feels amazing. I don't have a DualSense controller, so I didn't get exactly the haptic feedback experience that I'm supposed to get when I play Miles Morales, but it's still insane. The haptics are far better here than they were in the last game. The city looks far better here than it did in the last game. The lighting is far better here than it was in the last game. The sound engineering is far better here than it was in the last game. There are so many things that are stepped way up. And on the one hand, you expect that. It's 2 years later. They've worked with this stuff before. They know what they're doing. They can make the game easier, quicker, and better. But on the other hand, it's a smaller experience. It's Uncharted Lost Legacy. You know what I mean? It's that sort of thing. And not to say that I didn't love Lost Legacy. I like it a lot more than I like Uncharted 3, but it was not on the same level as Uncharted 4. This, though, can easily stand right next to the first game, without a doubt. Insomniac has struck gold twice. Lightning has struck in the same place twice. That's phenomenal. They realized that what they had wasn't broken, but they still fixed it. You know, the swinging feels a little bit less clumsy. Sometimes it was easy to get stuck in places that you weren't supposed to get stuck in. You would bang into things. That sort of thing doesn't happen here anymore. There are elements and details from the original game, like special animations when you interact with a certain thing while you're swinging, or how a character will deliver a line differently depending on what situation they're in, or how if you're in the middle of a conversation with somebody on the phone before you start a thing or whatever, it'll pick up where it left off and it'll like organically flow. Stuff like that. But it's still better here somehow. One thing also, most games have this. You have to approach certain enemies from a certain perspective. You have to do certain things to beat them. That worked just fine in the last game, but in this game, Miles has powers that Peter doesn't have, like, active camouflage and the Venom Strike. And those things work beautifully as game mechanics, and they add to the gameplay. They give you another thing to consider, another thing to think about, another way to approach a combat situation that you could not in the last game because you were playing a different character. That's the type of thing that I really wanted going into this game. I wanted Peter and Miles to have completely different gameplay identities, and Insomniac absolutely delivered. Not only does Miles act a completely different way than Peter, personality wise, but he behaves differently as far as gameplay. Obviously, the game controls in generally the same way. You press the buttons that you pressed last time and the same things happen. But his animations are different. His just the way that Miles interacts with the world as a character is completely different, and I love it so much. Miles is a character that I did not love when he was first introduced about 9 years ago because they didn't do enough right away to make him different than Peter Parker. They did the same thing that they did with Jason Todd and Dick Grayson, Wally West and Barry Allen. They were doing it with Miles Morales and Peter Parker, but they eventually figured it out. They figured out, hey, this kid is half black, half Puerto Rican, which a lot of you might not have been aware of if you haven't seen the movie, but they played into that, and now Miles has his own identity. And speaking of the movie, there are things that you know about Miles if you have seen the movie, and there are going to be things in the story that you might see coming, but they still hit way different. And I love that. Genki, Genki is the perfect companion character for a game like this. Because what you have to understand is that in the last game you were playing as a veteran Peter Parker. He'd been at it for nearly a decade, and he's really good at what he does. He does not approach being Spider-Man as some cool, fun adventure anymore. Miles has been Spider-Man for a couple months by this point, and he's never done it by himself until now. So obviously he's going to have a different outlook on the job. And this game does such a perfect job of not only making Miles feel like a realistic kid, but also somebody who just got superpowers and is super psyched about it. There are elements of this game's story, especially regarding the reason that Peter has to leave, which you probably have seen by now. I'm not going to spoil anything majorly related to the story, obviously, the game just came out. But the reason that Peter leaves and the story can center and focus primarily on Miles is a tie-in to the DLCs from the last game. So if you've played all those DLCs, you are rewarded for the knowledge that you gain from those. And I also love that this game comes with a recap of what happened in the last game because it has been 2 years, and there are some people that are going to play this that haven't played the last game because they want to see a Black Spider-Man. And I have no problem with that. I'm glad that Miles is getting the type of recognition that he's getting right now. He's never been more popular than he is right now. And what I love about him is you can play this game, you can watch uh, Into the Spider-Verse, and you can read his current comic line and get three completely different characters because they have different interests, different characteristics, but at their core, they are still the same person, and it's very noticeable. It's very identifiable. And that's really important when you have multiple adaptations of a character at the same time. You know, regardless of which live action Spider-Man is your favorite, whether you like Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, or Tom Holland. If you watch any of those movies and then you watch an animated series, and then you play Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, or Web of Shadows, or Ultimate Spider-Man, or Spider-Man 2018, you're getting very different versions of Spider-Man, but there's going to be something that you latch onto that is inherently uniquely Peter Parker Spider-Man, and that is why you are attached to that version of the character. That's the exact same sort of thing that we have with Miles right now, and I think it's phenomenal. I think it's beautiful. I think it's fantastic. I have two gripes with this game. One of them is that Miles's Venom Strike is not. It's a bioelectric ability by nature, but it's more of a neurotoxin. That's why it's called Venom, because you hit someone and you paralyze them, you shut down their neurosystem, and they can't move. But this game treats it like he's Electro or Static from Static Shock or something like that, and he has outright electric powers. Well, even Static doesn't have electric powers. He has magnetic powers. That's a completely different thing. But I got over that quickly because it's funny because like the game puts so much emphasis on it, like it becomes a plot thing. But it's mostly because paralysis would not service the gameplay the same way that having straight up electric powers does. So I got over that quickly. Second great, a couple of things with the story feel a little bit contrived, but it's totally fine. You get over it. You don't even notice it unless you're thinking about it in a critical way, like I think about everything. And I oftentimes do ruin my own fun like that sometimes. But, it's part of the job. Now, what else can I say about this game? Like I said, it is a huge step up from the last game. What I want to do as soon as I get a chance is play this game and play the original game like back to back and see, like how familiar things are. Also, the suits are a very important thing. Obviously, Peter Parker has had many more suits than Miles Morales has over the last, 60 years of comic books. But there are so many suits. I think there's something like 19 suits for Miles in this game so far. And they all look good. I don't love them all, but they all look good, which is a lot better than I could say for Peter's suits in the last game. So that's something you have to look forward to. As soon as I was able to get the Spider-Verse suit, I got it. Also, Insomniac. Okay, you watching, let me know if you've had the same problem in the comments. This is twice now that I pre-ordered Spider-Man and did not get access to the suits until the game would have already given me access to the suit. I had the same problem last time. I'm having it again now. I was supposed to get the Gravity Well gadget because I pre-ordered the game. I still don't have it. And I beat it. I beat the game. I have not 100%ed it yet. I don't know how you're supposed to acquire the Gravity Well gadget without having pre-ordered it. But I pre-ordered it. I put in my code. I downloaded the stuff. It's my add-ons are there. I might put up a screenshot. Depends on how I feel about it. But Insomniac, why is that? Why has that happened to me twice? Let me get my pre-order content. Third gripe with the game, I suppose. I didn't get my pre-order content when I was supposed to. But the Spider-Verse suit looks phenomenal in the game. I love that they went the extra mile and added that suit mod where he's animated the same way that he was in the movie at 12 frames per second. And it really stands out playing it at 30 FPS because on PS4 it is 30 FPS. It's locked there that you have no choice. But seeing the way that the suit moves is really enjoyable. And yeah, you can apply that to any other suit, but do you really want to do that? Do you really want to? Another thing, this game being a spin-off game is a lot shorter, so the plot is a lot more streamlined. There's a lot less BS that you have to do in the middle of the game, which is a huge relief because in the last game there were moments where it's like, can I just get back to doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing? And if you played the game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There are three things that come to mind. But I love the way that the story unfolds. I love the pacing. I love the characterization. Oh my God, the characterization of this game is phenomenal. The soundtrack. I don't know who decided to take the Spider-Man like theme music, throw in some 808, some hi-hats, some snares, but holy shit, it worked. It worked a treat. The soundtrack is so good. Also, Jaden Smith must love Miles Morales. I know this review was all over the place. It's sorry, I'm a nerd. This is what I do. What else is there to say? Oh yeah, the characterization. I got distracted. The Again, if you've seen the movie, I'm probably gonna compare this to the movie quite a bit. If you've seen the movie, you have an idea of how these characters are supposed to behave, what they're supposed to be. You will not be disappointed. You will be surprised, but you will not be disappointed. Things happen that legitimately do throw you for a loop. And I like that. I appreciate not being able to guess exactly how things are going to go just because I have comic knowledge or because I have knowledge from a different adaptation of the characters. Miles doesn't have the same type of rich history that Peter has. So with a story that's about Peter, it's a lot harder to keep you, or it's a lot easier to keep you guessing over the course of a 15-hour campaign than it would be for Miles because he hasn't been through all the same things. He's been around in the comics for about one-sixth the amount of time that Peter has. It's going to be harder to craft a completely brand new, unpredictable story around a character with so little comic history, but they pulled it off. And I applaud Insomniac an insane amount. And what I love is that before this game was announced, I was just hoping that there would be some significant Miles gameplay in the second game. And here you go. Here's the whole game about him. And another thing that I love is that I didn't want the story to unfold towards the beginning in such a way that it felt like Miles was just an understudy for Peter. And luckily, even though it is kind of set up that way, it never feels that way. Because here's why. All right. Last game, you're saving pretty much the entirety of New York from a horrible plague. This game, the stakes are a lot lower. They strike an interesting balance between a situation where the stakes are low enough for Miles, a rookie Spider-Man, to be able to handle it without Peter, and high enough for Miles to feel like this is too much for him, that he needs help, that he can't do this without Peter. And that must have taken so much time and thought and effort to get right. And I wonder when they decided to make this. Because I would not be surprised if they were working on this and the DLCs at the same time. There's so much that went into this game. The game does such a good job too of making you actually feel like a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, because that's not exactly a thing that happened last time. Sure, you interacted on the ground level, but the story and a lot of the side missions weren't exactly built around that. You know what I mean? Things were kind of always medium to high stakes in that game. This game, it's like, hey man, I lost my cat. Can you find him? You know what I mean? And I love that for Miles. I love that he's the one that's looking out for the little guy. He's the one that's protecting the city on the lowest possible level. because those are his people. You know, the 99%, those are his people. The people that are, overlooked by society most of the time. Miles is a double minority, you know. Those are the types of things that affect him the most. And so of course, that's what he's there for. Like there's a certain point in the story where the citizens start calling him our Spider-Man, and I love that. I oh man. There's there's a really subtle moment where in the subtitles when he's talking it stops being Miles and starts just being Spider-Man. And when I noticed that I was like, that's pretty cool. I love this it's a coming of age story, obviously. That's what it would have to be. But it feels like so much more than that. Now, here's what I will say. The game is short. I picked it up today, installed it at around 5, and it took me about 7, 8 hours to beat it. And I did plenty of side content before I actually finished the story. The game costs $50, and you can beat it that quickly. And I'm sure that going back in and finishing it to 100% would not take much longer, maybe an hour to 2 hours more of gameplay, to get the platinum trophy. Well, no, you have to beat it a second time to get the platinum trophy, so that's what I'm looking forward to doing. But it's up to you to decide if it's worth it. If it were 40 like the Lost Legacy was, I would more urge you to go out there and buy it right now. But PS5 exclusive games are costing more. It's a $10 increase. So for some reason, that affects the PS4 version of Miles Morales as well. I really don't understand that. But yeah, the game does cost $50. So I do have to hesitate just a bit when recommending that you go out and buy this game as soon as possible. But I do still recommend playing the game. Honestly, throughout everything, I enjoyed this one more than the last one, mostly because there isn't so much artificial padding. There there are the puzzles aren't, exactly challenging, but they're a lot more engaging than trying to route power from one side of a puzzle board to the other. The puzzles in the last game were not very interesting. But I I've gotten to the point where I feel like Miles is a more personable character than Peter is. Maybe that's because I'm black. I really don't know. I don't care that much. I have certain expectations out of a Miles story that I don't really have out of a Peter story. And that's just where things have, ended up for me at this point. That's totally a me thing. I'm not gonna say that you will absolutely prefer this game over the last one, but it's going to be pretty hard to deny that in many ways this is a huge step up from the last one. This game is spectacular. It's amazing. It's sensational. It's friendly neighborhood. It's ultimate. It's avenging. It's web of. It's any Spider-Man title you can come up with. It's superior. It's just it's this is exactly what I wanted it to be. I wanted a tighter experience. I wanted expanded upon gameplay. I wanted a story that felt like it was uniquely Miles and that it could not happen to Peter. I wanted Miles to have his own types of personal struggles that don't mirror Peter in any sort of way. I wanted Miles to come into his own. I wanted so many things, and this game delivered on every single one of them. And I honestly couldn't have been more satisfied with this game. I am left with no lingering desires. It doesn't leave you wanting more when you're done. Well, obviously it leaves you want another game, but it's not like, oh man, I wish that this game had done that or done this or whatever. I will say, since the game is not built for PS4, I did have some issues with frame rate drops, and I did have a little bit of a performance issue with the climax of the game. And I had some audio bugs. Apart from that, though, performance on PS4 was stupendous. It didn't get hot. It didn't start sounding like a spaceship or anything like that. The game runs fine on PS4, even though it's not built for it, which is a huge relief. Um, so if you're bummed out that you couldn't get a PS5, the game is still perfect on PS4 97% of the time. What else can I talk about this game, dude? I should go to bed soon. It's 4 a.m., but we'll see what happens. Uh, I guess the last thing I want to say is that Miles and Peter are by nature two very different characters. Um, Yuri Lowenthal does a great job as I almost said Sasuke, that too, but as Peter in the last game and in this game. Also, regards to Peter's new face, he looks fine, doesn't bother me at all. Anyway, um, Yuri does a great job as Peter, and I was worried that while I was playing this, I was just gonna be wishing I was hearing Yuri Lowenthal's voice, wishing I was controlling Peter, playing as Peter, because that is Spider-Man for a lot of people. But I can happily report to you that this game does a phenomenal job at making you love playing as Miles, even though you hated playing as Miles in the last game. But he's got powers now. He's got his own identity. He's just, man, he is Spider-Man. Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Miles Morales is Spider-Man. And I can't wait to see them both get their own, stories continued in the future. Also, no spoilers, but this game has a crazy Easter egg. And then another crazy Easter egg. Like, holy shit. But I'm honestly really excited to see what this means for the future of Spider-Verse games. I would love a Ghost Spider game. I would love a Noir game, 2099 game, Scarlet Spider game, all sorts of different things are possible now because we have a game all about Miles Morales. They don't, have to be full price games. They can be in the $50, but I would just like to see what other studios can, well, not other studios, but like what other spiders can have their stories told in the same way. Obviously, it would be a lot to ask of Insomniac to make Spider-Man games for seven different Spider people, but there's a lot of studios out there. There's Bend, there's Bluepoint, you know, Sony can hand the rights off to any studio they want and get a game made. It doesn't have to be in the same universe. I just want exposure for other different Spider people. And I feel like it's more possible now than it would have been 5 years ago because of where we are with Miles Morales. So overall, this is a perfect game. This is a perfect Spider-Man game experience. You really do become the Batman. With all that being said, I gotta go to bed. I'll see you guys later.